right perspective of Global South. Global South was not a term which was looked at with respect, but was looked at by the developed nations as less developing economies. But India brought in a sense of pride even to Global South, put them on the table that when we are talking of global economy, we must also talk about the people who have lagged behind. So same approach as the approach we took in within the country of bringing everyone onto the table, including everyone in the conversations, that if India has to do well, every district has to do well. And thus the concept of aspirational district was evolved in within our domestic parameter. Similar to that if world has to be a peaceful place, if world has to get ahead, if world economy has to progress, then progress necessarily has to include the ones who got left behind. So Global South became the agenda for G20. Otherwise, G20 was a group of top performing 20 economies. But top performing 20 economies cannot succeed until and unless the ones who are left behind are brought on the table and their concerns, which are going to be impacted the most by the economic policies, have to be heard. So Global South was the agenda which Government of India brought forward in G20, and thus Global South conversation started to wear in terms of resource management, in terms of emerging economies, in terms of green energy. And when India came up with the tagline Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. So most of our conversation got divided under three heads. So when we say one earth, all these sustainable development goals, health, education, green energy, etc. got fitted into one earth as to how we have to better the atmosphere of the earth so that everybody's interdependence is on the climate change, green hydrogen, availability of fertilizers, usage of organic fertilizers, etc., food, all that fell under one earth. One family. So women-led development was discussed for the first time in G20, and India started this particular conversation. And now it seems that after India gives the baton to Brazil for holding the next G20 presidency, women-led development and empowerment of women is going to be a permanent subject of G20, which will go to the credit of India that India introduced this for the first time. And in this particular vertical, we talked about education, health, and food security. All this fell under one family. One future. Now, future cannot be there until unless we have technology which is people-friendly, technology which is inclusive, technology which serves the purpose of greater human cause, cyber security, and in the first, we also talked, for the first time, we talked about cyber security and narco-terrorism. This was not the subjects which were discussed earlier. So this particular G20 had many firsts. Many firsts. In those many firsts was one biggest first, and that is getting African Union to be part of G20. For the first time ever, the African Union was involved as part of G20. So that's how important Global South became. That people who are going to be impacted the most by the economic policies need to be heard, need to be brought on the same table. And the best part was when African Union's name was announced by none less than our Prime Minister Modi, it became so important that usually Argentina was the country which will be called first by virtue of letter A, but Africa fell before Argentina. And when African Union was called first as the first member on the table, it was both symbolic and in terms of material implication, it was very, very important, because most of the resources lie with Africa and they are not able to use those resources. So money by the richer countries need to be spent in a manner or invested in a manner that African Union also gets benefited, and with the resources of African Union, the development happens in other parts of the world, and both sides are impacted and benefited out of the processes. I must tell you that for the first time, 28 heads of states participated in G20. Never ever before this number has been achieved by any country so far. 60 cities across the country participated or became the destination for G20 summits, for G20 meetings. And even your state, Andhra Pradesh, was one of them, where 2 such meetings happened in terms of infrastructure. And I remember one of the ambassadors, I will not name him, but he took a picture at the Vizag beach and put it on the net saying, "This is not California, this is Vizag." So it makes all of us proud. I may not come from Andhra Pradesh, I may come from Delhi, but Andhra Pradesh, people of Andhra Pradesh are mine. I mean, we belong to each other. We all are Indians, and if something good happens in any part of the country, it makes us all very, very proud. I must say the success of G20, especially after post-pandemic, this was one biggest event of this nature, where so many flights landed in Delhi, where so many protocols had to be kept in order, where so many heads of states with their entourage were taken to their respective destinations. So many, more than 200 meetings across the country is what has already taken place. So state governments, center, secretariat, everyone working together for the well-being of the nation is what G20 showcased. Every Indian was proud of being part of that particular event which country was hosting. And the best part is, normally what I've heard from the outsiders, from people representing other countries, wherever G20 events happened, there were people protesting outside those venues, locally, domestically, in those countries. First time ever in the history of G20, they found in India there was not a single protest. And Prime Minister made it clear from day one that this is about Jan Bhagidari. This is about people's participation. This is about nation coming together to showcase what strength of India is in a very democratic manner, and democracy will be the foundation of hosting G20, no matter which governments run which states. We are all one when it comes to national pride. That was the message of G20, and I'm very clear that that message was taken very positively by the world at large. And I remember in the center, we were asked just few hours before or one day before the actual summit where heads of states were meeting, where people were asking whether there will be a joint declaration And everybody, not just people within the country, but outside the country, were sitting with their baits that probably there will not be a joint declaration. And I remember being asked that. And obviously, one did not know what's going to happen. And the method which was devised earlier was just kept aside because at the level of heads of states, Prime Minister Modi's leadership was commended by one and all. And everyone came together in favor of India to bring a joint statement. And that joint statement sent out such a strong message that the kind of affection and the kind of importance every country gave to India. Everybody wanted India's presidency to become a success, and we had put our heart and soul into it. So the money which usually, the last big event which India hosted before G20, we've had BRICS, we've had African Union Summit at the level of, from MEA perspective. From the infrastructure perspective, I can only think of Commonwealth Games. And I remember during Commonwealth Games, all kind of scams and things that took place. G20 was a cleaner slate. And we did work on infrastructure. We did develop our infrastructure. Your state hosted 2 conferences on infrastructure. The road, I'm coming after more than 10 years, and I know this central road was in a bad shape when I came last. It is done. It is done very well. And the kind of money central government has spent on road infrastructure across the country, particularly in your state, I would say you have benefited with the work of central government to the tune that earlier you would have had 4,000 plus kilometers of road. Today you have more than 9,000 kilometers of road. So more than double roads is what you have received within this span ever since Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister. Even in terms of airports, we can all see the development which has happened at the airports. Number of airports each state has got, number of helipads which have been developed, is all happened in 9.5 years. 9.5 years, the emphasis has been on inclusion, building infrastructure, working on technology. I'm sure everybody in Andhra Pradesh would be proud of what ISRO has done, would be proud of landing of Chandrayaan on the moon and Aditya L1. The kind of power, the kind of strength, the kind of scientific know-how we have showcased to the world that this is what India is all about. Many things have happened in terms of even Har Ghar Nal Se Jal, so bringing water to every household, giving clean fuel to the women in rural area. Even there the numbers were abysmal. When we came to power in 2014, I still remember and recount that number, about 12 crore gas connections existed across the country. And in those 12 crore connections, most of the connections were based only in urban areas. The rural areas did not have any gas connection. We changed that equation. We gave clean fuel to the women who were spending days working on collecting fuel for their households and damaging their lungs, basically. We changed that so that women's health becomes important. In terms of health, the inclusion happened by Ayushman card, the insurance scheme which the center brought in, and it is one of the largest schemes run by the center across the globe. No country runs this kind of scheme which India does. More than 50 crore people being included in that scheme is nowhere happening. So whether it is education, even in education, your state has benefited because the central schemes got implemented in your state where the school infrastructure was changed. And by changing that infrastructure, better performance is happening, more girls are joining schools and less dropout rate. The happiness as a woman it gives me that government has been very focused on women-led development. G20, India brought out this particular working group which is for the first time introduced about process of inclusion where a particular gender, that is women, was left out of the developmental process. So women-led development was one vertical which India brought, and immediately thereafter G20 goes, it's not as if G20 goes and Government of India stops working and sits on its accolades. Immediately after G20, a special session of the parliament was called in and 33% reservation for women in upper house and in the parliament is what was planned, and parliament and legislative assembly has been planned and is before everyone. You know what stands out? What stands out is again the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, because I have lived through those times and moments, mid-90s to 2000 and after 2000, I have seen politics of that time with my own eyes and heard comments with my own ears. I have heard the comments from parties like RJD and several others where they said lipstick wali, bob cut, and some very bad language is what has been used, demeaning language has been used by those men who sat in the parliament at that point in time. And I was very surprised how come these parties came around to support the women's bill. I was very surprised. And then I kind of searched and searched for the reason. I said, have these people actually changed their mindset? Have they become better people? Have their character been changed? You know what I realized? I realized the politics of 9.5 years led by Prime Minister Modi is what has changed these people. What has changed is that in these 9.5 years, Prime Minister's focus was very quiet, where he was building foundation for getting this bill passed. For the simple reason that women were earlier not considered a political force because they were less empowered. And by giving them toilets, by giving them bank accounts, by including them in clean fuel, by including them in Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao in terms of education, by bringing focus in terms of sports, getting them included in account in every process, health, looking after their health, providing them with simple things like sanitary pads. Everybody knows women require it, but nobody worked on it. Things simple, toilets, sanitary pads, health, these things have been worked at in 9.5 years. So women became very confident. When women became confident, they started to count and they became a political force. And because women became a political force, no party could afford to ignore them. And because they could not ignore them, they had to pass this bill because they could not be seen as people opposing it. And that is why this bill got passed. I don't think very many mindsets have changed, because I heard one leader from RJD making some very crass remarks in Bihar recently. I said in the parliament they supported the bill, but outside this man is making these remarks because the mindset has still not changed. And they, for political expediency, could not be seen as people opposing the bill. And that is where the strength of Prime Minister's leadership lies, that he would have thought about, he would have acted upon it, and he would have planned how best this can be brought in. For everybody's consumption, I want to bring forward a fact. And the fact is, when Prime Minister Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, his was the first state which passed women reservation bill in the state assembly and made it into a state, he brought it as a state bill. It could not become an act because he sent it to the then run Congress government in the center for signing on that passed bill, which never happened. So the idea of women being brought in was there from the beginning, but he also knew the impediments which he faced over the years, and he worked around them to have this bill passed over a period of time. And quietly for 9.5 years, all the welfare measures were being done to work towards women as an empowered group. And this empowered group is something which no party could be seen to annoy, to work against. And thus this bill got passed with consensus. And I think that's a big victory for India. Having a new parliament building, I think India wanted it, India deserved it, and every previous government before us was asking for it, but none worked on it. We worked on it in less money, less resources. We made a far better building, and we've sort of, it's a gift to the people of India, and that is also about future of India, where number of constituencies will increase, where people will increase, and thus very futuristic building to meet the future requirement of the nation. This particular act has happened. And in terms of my own department, I take a lot of pride in the fact that when we came to power, we've worked on in a targeted way that more and more Indian sites be included as UNESCO World Heritage Site. For your region, I must say, Ramappa Temple got included last year, and it was quite a battle, quite a struggle, but we got it done. This year, we've done Shanti Niketan, and we've also done Hoysala, an ensemble of Hoysala temples as part of UNESCO World Heritage. We've been working non-stop, and these things are as important as, on coming on any of the international bodies. So we have been working on building our image in the multilateral bodies, bringing India forward no matter which part of the country, taking Indian interests forward across, making Kashmir as one of the heritage cities. Srinagar was brought on that chart, like Banaras was brought in. So whether it's craft, it's culture, it's design, architecture, art, we've tried to bring everyone together, because this diversity is our strength, and this diversity actually showcases the unity of the country. Because no matter expressions change, but we all love our country, we all worship the same gods, we all have our own formulations. I mean, a sari is a sari, whether it is Pochampalli or it's Kanjivaram or it's Banarsi. And all women across the country love wearing all different saris. That is the strength of this country. So we wear the same fabric, maybe woven differently. And there lies the love, affection and strength of our country, which all Indians are very proud of. I am very content and happy that one got an opportunity to work in the present government when India was making strides towards building and laying foundation of Bharat of Amrit Kal. And this Bharat of Amrit Kal is going to be the foundation of what India becomes in 2047. And we were part of the solution and not part of the problem, is something which kind of is very satisfactory for people like me, that we always work for being part of the solution. Thank you very much. I seek if you have any questions to ask, I will happily answer them.
There is no more opportune or less opportune time. Idea is to pass it at the right time, especially after G20 became important. On one side, globally, India was promoting women and made that change in the thinking of the world by making women's agenda part of global agenda during our presidency. So it was only right to bring this subscription to the country immediately after G20.
Bank accounts. So if there were families which had 3 or 4 bank accounts, majority of the families did not have a single bank account. So opening 52 crore bank accounts in just about 4 months, making that as a foundation of inclusion process, financial inclusion, servicing through the direct benefit. Now, direct benefit, we all know, has helped in alleviating people's life by removing corruption. Because I remember one of the former Prime Minister used to say, if government of India sends 100 rupees, by the time it reaches the account holder or who needs, it remains only 15 rupees. And today, government run by Mr. Modi sends 100 rupees. By the time person takes the money out, it becomes 110 rupees. For the simple reason that the banking facilities would have given some interest over the money which has reached the person's banking account. So, process of inclusion has brought in not just transparency but efficiency into the financial system. All the small vendors, the fruit seller, the juice maker, others have also got under Swanidhi Yojana banking facilities, and through these banking facilities they can procure loans, they get benefits, and they get to be helped directly by the government rather than by the intermediaries. In terms of inclusion, we've also seen that how Kisan Samman Nidhi, because all said and done, Andhra Pradesh is also an agro economy. There is a huge population of farmers and horticulturists, and also people who work in the fishing department. The fisheries by itself, which is part of agriculture, today fisheries is a separate department, but they also get benefited by all the central schemes. So blue economy is something Government of India is working very deeply on, and many coastal states, including Andhra Pradesh, have benefited out of all those schemes. So this is how inclusion worked in 9.5 years, and everybody who I have come across keeps on wondering that what people take 50 years to accomplish, you've done it in 6 years. And all that is indigenous system which India has built in the area of fintech, financial inclusion and technology being used simultaneously. I must say that when G20 happened, every Indian, no matter which party's government was there, no matter which side of the political divide the person belonged to, but G20 made every Indian proud. And that pride in Indians is not only for the Indians living in India, but all the NRIs, diaspora, which lives in other countries, also felt very proud. Nobody had to hide their identity. People with great pride today say we are Indians and this is my blue passport. And that blue passport's value in the eyes of people has only increased for the simple reason that assertion of a sense of pride is what Indians have started to look upon themselves. And that sense is something which has brought all of us together. G20, even internationally, was a huge success. It was a huge success because India, when took the presidency, brought in the right perspective of Global South. Global South was not a term which was looked at with respect, but was looked at by the developed nations as less developing economies. But India brought in a sense of pride even to Global South, put them on the table that when we are talking of global economy, we must also talk about the people who have lagged behind. So same approach as the approach we took within the country of bringing everyone onto the table, including everyone in the conversations, that if India has to do well, every district has to do well. And thus the concept of aspirational district was evolved within our domestic parameter. Similar to that if world has to be a peaceful place, if world has to get ahead, if world economy has to progress, then progress necessarily has to include the ones who got left behind. So Global South became the agenda for G20. Otherwise, G20 was a group of top performing 20 economies. But top performing 20 economies cannot succeed until and unless the ones who are left behind are brought on the table and their concerns, which are going to be impacted the most by the economic policies, have to be heard. So Global South was the agenda which Government of India brought forward in G20, and thus Global South conversation started to wear in terms of resource management, in terms of emerging economies, in terms of green energy. And when India came up with the tagline,